following program is brought to you in living color on NBC.
Exclusively on ESPN Plus, UFC 313, Saturday. Reigning light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira defends his title against number one contender Magomed Ankalaev, and an explosive lightweight bout between Justin Gaethje and Rafael Fiziev. UFC 313, Saturday at 10 p.m. Eastern. Buy it on ESPNplus.com/PPB.
This episode is brought to you by Coffee Mate. After watching this season of the HBO's original series, The White Lotus, this is the tropical getaway I needed. One more pina colada, please.
Hey, you're not on mute.
Oh, I thought I was in paradise. Turns out it was my Coffee Mate. Coffee Mate Pina Colada and Thai iced coffee flavored creamers. Inspired by the newest season of HBO's original series, The White Lotus. For the love of coffee. Try now.
This is the Classic Guitar Rock Daily Update. All the classic rock news of the day. With your host, Jeremy Lunnan.
The fountain drink is cold. And it's time for what's the second time this week I've done this? It's terrible. What a poor customer experience I'm providing to you. I'm sorry. My apologies. It's Friday though. We had to do an update. Things are really busy. It's been a crazy week. Good and bad, right? But thank you so much for being here. Let me start out by plugging CGR Radio, Classic Guitar Rock Radio. We continue to add more and more listeners. It's awesome. We've got a sponsor, and I'm just going to throw this plug out to you. Our listenership is small. It's growing, right? I mean, we have so far since April 1, I don't have the numbers right in front of me. We have 3,000 listeners. I mean, it's growing. It's not huge. But if you are a business that markets particularly to an online audience, right? That your normal marketing is, you sell a good or a product that people order. It's what I'm saying is, outside of the Spokane area, right? You can't localize a whole lot. But there's still a significant reach there that you can reach for a very economical price. Let me just say this. You would be shocked at how inexpensively you could market and be a sponsor on Classic Guitar Rock Radio. Just throwing it out there. That's my sales pitch. If you are trying to reach an audience and majority male, it's we play classic rock. It's Gen Xers. So you can imagine it's probably a mostly male audience over 40, but there's a lot of disposable income in that group. That's a very attractive demographic. Hey, I'm just throwing it out there. If you have a product or service you want to market and hit that demo, shoot me an email, classicguitarrock@mail.com. And you will be pleasantly surprised at how inexpensively you can get your message out. I'll just throw that out there. Let's hop to the news. Bruce K is checking in. Good morning, Bruce. Good to hear from you. Thank you for chiming in. And as always, any of you that are watching on X or on YouTube or on Facebook, come on in. The water's fine. Say good morning to Bruce. Let's talk about Heart. And before I share this news about Heart, I have over recent months been listening to more and more Heart. And I'm talking about the 70s Heart. And they were awesome. Seriously, you go back to those 70s Heart albums, the musicianship, they're just awesome. They were one of the great rock bands of the era. And I'm not sure they get the credit they should, because those are phenomenal records. Now, later in the 80s, when they had even more commercial success, they were a great pop rock band. Don't get me wrong. They put out good stuff, but it ain't the same as the stuff in the 70s. Just phenomenal music. They were more, I'll get in trouble when I say this. They sounded more like Led Zeppelin in the late 70s than Led Zeppelin sounded like Led Zeppelin. I mean, they really kind of took that mantle and made it even more, it sound better, right? The genius, as smart as Jimmy Page was, he put some crappy sounding guitar tones on their records. He's a great producer, very creative. I get that. He's one of the masters. But man, he recorded some nasty sounding guitar tones. He did. Heart, to me, took what Zeppelin was doing. And by the end of the 70s, Zeppelin was kind of a little boring, guys. Sorry, people don't want to hear. In Through the Outdoor, kind of boring. I'm going to get in all kinds of trouble today. But Heart, mid to late 70s, and of course, they were huge Zeppelin fans. Man, you hear the Zeppelin influence, but you don't hear the nasty, funky guitar tones that you heard on some of the Zeppelin stuff. I love Heart. I love that era, the late 70s, the 70s era Heart, I'll call it. And then by the time the 80s roll around, it was still good, but it wasn't the same, right? It changed. So why am I talking about Heart? Well, there was drama with Ann and Nancy. Understandably so when we talk about it here. Details surrounding Heart's family drama have come to light, including that Ann and Nancy Wilson insisted on separate sanctuary zones amid the ordeal. So in 2016, there was a tour. Talk about awkward. This is awkward, right? 2016, when Ann's husband, Dean Wetter, got in a big argument with Nancy's teenage sons. So apparently one of the boys let Ann's dogs out of her tour bus. Apparently they weren't supposed to do that. Well, Wetter, so this would be their Uncle Dean, punches one of the boys and even tried choking the other one. He was fired up. He was mad. As you can imagine, yeah, that's awkward. If your uncle tries beating up your kids, you're going to be pretty upset. So anyways, they had to set up these sanctuary zones, and not just, I mean, it was like in the contract, they need to have sanctuary zones. So Ann's family would be here and Nancy's family here. And of course, there were charges. I mean, it was a big mess. So that was some of the drama, why Ann and Nancy weren't doing anything together. They toured again in 2019, but there was still a lot of tension. It's awkward. It's awkward when things like that happen, obviously. But they've come together in 2023. They started touring again as Heart. And Nancy says, I love being in the band Heart. It's the thing me and Ann built together. And it's a beautiful machine, a big metal horse that gets a lot of attention. Ann Wilson or Nancy Wilson separate, not nearly as many people are interested or come out to see it because it's not Heart. So, I mean, the chance to do Heart again, despite, whatever the static on the outskirts, the periphery of it all, I don't care about. I just want to do the Heart thing. Okay, so they're committed to just doing the Heart thing. But related to that, okay, Nancy has also said she has no interest in reuniting with Heart's original lineup. Okay, I was just lauding the 70s lineup of Heart. That's the best stuff. That's the best stuff. But she has no interest in reuniting that original lineup. Bruce Kay says, I had Little Queen, Dreamboat Annie, Dog and Butterfly on cassettes and wore them out. That's what I'm talking about, right? Little Queen, Dreamboat Annie, Dog and Butterfly. Those are phenomenal albums. Raymond Bocek is checking in. I think I pronounced your last name right. Raymond says, money rules. Yeah, money does have a way of making people settle their differences, right? Let's see. Peace of mind. Peace of mind. Mary Ann says, to be fair, I don't think I could have spent time on the road with my sister. Sharing a room was enough. I I can relate. I have 2 older sisters, and they did share a room, and it wasn't good all the time. That's awesome. Yeah, the family dynamic. We love our families to death, but there's a reason we grow up and at 18 we leave, right? Anyways, Nancy, no interest in reuniting the original lineup. No interest at all. And again, that lineup, that's the best lineup. Okay. In a recent conversation with the Washington Post, Ann Wilson's manager, Dave Fry, noted that Hart had been given a big offer to perform a special concert at Washington State's famous Gorge Amphitheater. It's in the middle of the state, about 130 miles down the road from me. The Gorge. Yeah, it's a great place to see a show. So they were offered money to reunite with the original lineup. The request, he explained, was to have Hart's original 75 lineup back together for the show, celebrating the 50th anniversary of Dreamboat Annie. According to Fry, Ann was on board with the idea, even suggesting that a documentary could be filmed chronicling the event. Nancy, however, had zero interest. She says, quote, "I don't think you could pay me enough," she declared. What's the word? It's icky. The thing that the fans don't ever consider is the unpleasantness of how the relationships within the band function. If the band split up, there was a reason for that. Okay. So there were at different times, there were romantic entanglements. I think both Ann and Nancy dated different members of the band, kind of like Fleetwood Mac deal, right? It can get awkward. Raymond says, "I got to meet them after show on the Dog and Butterfly tour." Wow, that is awesome. Bruce says, "I still play the intro to Barracuda all the time on my guitar." I think every guitar player if that's the only Heart song they know, they turn on the flanger and they play the beginning of Barracuda. I think everyone loves that. That's a great one. So yeah, it's interesting, the dynamics when you've got a band and when you've got, let's be honest, guys, when you've got a band that has men and women, that typically adds another wrinkle. I mean, look at Fleetwood Mac, Heart. If you get members that are dating each other and all of that, that adds a wrinkle of complexity there as well. So basically that original lineup broke up in like the early 80s. Howard Leese was the only one that stayed with Ann and Nancy throughout the 80s. The Fishers, let me get the names right here. So Roger Fisher was a guitarist, bassist Steve Fossen, and then there was another Fisher. Michael Fisher was the band's manager. So the Fisher brothers were involved. Anyways, they broke up, right? Howard stayed with them throughout the 80s, Howard Leese. And then the band changed, right? They experienced their greatest commercial success in the 80s, but it is hard to beat those classic lineup albums from Heart. So there you go. Paul McCartney. He's broken a lot of records, right? Holds lots of records. Think of all the songs that Paul McCartney wrote. He still packs arenas. Well, he's just been named as the first billionaire musician in the UK. So net worth $1.27 billion. In comparison, Ringo's got about $350 million. So Paul's done considerably well. Of course, Paul's solo career was the most successful, obviously. And of course, John Lennon tragically was killed in 1980. So his solo career was cut way short. I get in trouble when I say this. I'm going to say it. I love Paul's solo stuff way more than John's solo stuff. Just saying. So it's been a good recent few years for Paul because, like the Beatles re-release of their final song Now and Then, he made some money off of that. Beyonce covering Blackbird, that doesn't hurt, right? He's making some royalties from that. Plus, he's just, he's been in the public eye a lot he always has. He never hasn't been, but it seems like especially in the last couple years, even more so. Styx has confirmed Terry Gowan as their replacement for former bassist Ricky Phillips, who announced his departure back in March. So Ricky Phillips, of course, had been a member of the Babies. I think he was in Bad English. Was he in Bad English? I think he might have been in Bad English. I could be wrong. He's kind of a journeyman musician, predominantly a bass player, but also could play guitar. And he's been in Styx for like 15 years. It was interesting with Styx because we've got Chuck Pinozzo, who was the original bass player, and his brother John Pinozzo was the original drummer. John died way back in the late 80s or early 90s. Todd Zuckerman has been in there since then. So he's been in there, 30 years now. But what they would often do is on occasion, Chuck Pinozzo would come join the band and play. Then you got an original bass player, but not very often, just occasionally. And in those situations, then Ricky Phillips would just play guitar. He'd still perform with the band. I think they needed his background vocals more than anything. I don't think Chuck Pinozzo contributed much vocally. I could be wrong, but I don't know that he sang much, where Ricky Phillips is a great background singer. Anyways, once he announced his departure, they had to do something because they needed obviously a bass player. Chuck only comes in occasionally, so they needed a full-time bass player, but someone who could also sing. So Terry Gowan happens to be the brother of Lawrence Gowan, who's the dude that replaced Dennis DeYoung. He's the keyboard player and singer now, one of the singers. There's 3 lead singers in Styx. So they brought Terry. Now, Terry had worked with his brother in a band called Gowan for years. Todd Zuckerman actually had played with both Lawrence and Terry for years. So he's known by the group. But this guy has also worked with Tony Levin, John Anderson, Alex Lifeson. So he's got quite a resume also. But now he is officially the new bass player in Styx. He says, quote, "It is an honor and somewhere beyond a dream come true to be joining JY, Tommy, Chuck, Will, and my brother Lawrence, and to be reacquainted with decade-long Gowan bandmate Todd. Here's to many years ahead on the Styx adventures." So he's excited about it. Bruce Kay says, "People don't realize how big of a deal John Pinozzo with his creativity to the success of Styx." Yeah, John was the original drummer, died of cancer. I think it was cancer. I think that's what died. Late 80s, early 90s. He was a great drummer too, by the way. Great drummer. You can find interview pieces where Todd is talking about John and the unique things that John did that, of course, Todd had to learn playing all these songs and stuff. It's pretty cool. But yeah, he was a great drummer. Steve Perry confirms that he's signed with a new label and he's now hinting at a return to concert stages. Now, remember, in the whole Journey soap opera, okay, the reason that Steve Perry was fired was he didn't want to go on tour. And there's a lot of back and forth. Basically, he had to get a back surgery or something. And the band was like, okay, then get your back surgery, get this taken care of. And he wouldn't. I mean, it just went on for years. And so finally they fired him. Well, now he's saying, I'm signed with a new label and I'm going to go on tour. So here you go. He hasn't mounted a solo tour in 30 years and last performed a full-length concert in 1987 with Journey. That was the Raised on Radio iteration that had Randy Jackson on bass. Remember that? That's the last tour that Steve Perry has been on. He says, quote, "It's something that I'm absolutely missing terribly. I can't even tell you how much, but there's been a big soulful reclaiming of this original feeling that I had about singing that I needed to get back to. I didn't want to go out and just turn the wheel or turn the crank. Now, you hear things like that, and of course, everyone's going to be ooh, do you think he'll get back with Journey? Do you think that maybe they could get back and I don't know. There's a lot of bad blood between Neil and Steve, I think. So I don't know. Be interesting to see. A lawsuit from 2022 involving King Crimson and Kanye West has finally been settled. Had you heard about this? I wasn't even aware of this. I mean, I knew that Kanye kind of had a pattern of borrowing parts of songs. You know, he wanted to use some Black Sabbath stuff, and Ozzy told him no. Apparently, he used some King Crimson stuff. And, well, there was a lawsuit. 2 years ago, Declan Colgan Music Limited sued Universal Music Group for underpaid streaming royalties from Kanye West's 2010 song Power, which samples King Crimson's 21st Century Schizoid Man. DCM owns the mechanical rights to Crimson's 69 songs. So back in 2010, DCM alleged that West did not properly license 21st Century Schizoid Man before uploading his own song to YouTube and including it on his 2010 album, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. A deal was reached then. West could keep the sample in return for a 5.33% royalty on each copy of Power that was sold. But over a decade later, DCM argued that they should be compensated the same royalty percentage for digital streams as for physical CD sales. So it's finally been settled. So it's been settled. So everyone's happy. Good for everyone. Speaking of artists that borrow other people's stuff a lot, a new documentary about Led Zeppelin will be coming to theaters. Becoming Led Zeppelin has been picked up for theatrical release by Sony Classics Pictures, according to a statement by the company. The movie has been gestating for some time now. The film was announced in 2019 and completed in 2021 with approval and participation by the band. Not as easy as it may seem because Led Zeppelin has a long history of being tight with its music and image. But they're all on board. Becoming Led Zeppelin premiered in a rough cut at the Venice Film Festival in September 2021. But since then, the film had slipped out of view with no word whether or not anyone outside that select festival group would ever see the movie. Well, now we'll be able to see it. Let's see. Raymond says, I think he's talking about Heart here. Got them to autograph the picture disc LP on the vinyl record with the heart on the teeter-totter. Yeah, okay, that's about Heart. And then he also says, I've met Journey and hung out with them in Detroit in 79 and 80. That's when Neil had his big afro still. That's cool. That is awesome. All right, one last thing. New music alert. Bon Jovi has released the official Neville Bernard directed lyric video for the band's new single, Living Proof. The track is taken from Bon Jovi's upcoming 16th studio album, Forever, which will arrive on June 7th. The new LP is now available for pre-order, where fans can find exclusive colored vinyl options, CDs, cassettes, and limited edition signed copies. That's cassettes again. See how they're making cassettes again? That's crazy. Here's a quote from Bon Jovi. We bring back the talk box. The idea based on Peter Frampton and Joe Walsh and our using it first on Living on a Prayer. This is a big old rock song, just the way you like it. So if you love that talk box from Living on a Prayer, you'll like it. I'm gonna go check it out. Haven't seen it yet. All right, guys, thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in for the update. Thanks for following us on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook. If you haven't checked out the radio station yet, take a minute. Go to classicguitarrock.com, classicguitarrock.com. Just click on that big white button that says CGR Radio. Check it out. Let me know what you think. Have a great weekend. Live long and prosper. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
Thanks for listening. You can email Jeremy at classicguitarrock@mail.com.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
Tune in each weekday for the Classic Guitar Rock Daily Update.